I got really enthralled in the first season of the Brazilian Netflix series Invisible City because it dove into their folklore, showcasing some pretty amazing creatures while immersing us in a mystery. Well, the second season has finally arrived, so does it share the same magic as before? After returning to life in sacred waters near Belém do Pará, Eric does everything to find his daughter Luna, and in that quest, he might discover her true nature. So this season removes some of the cops and bad guys elements for the mystery and then focuses even more on the environmental factor that the folklore is so entrenched in. Now, Eric, the main character from the first season, is or was a sort of environmental cop, but he sacrificed himself in the final episode of season 1 in order to thwart the bad guy and also save some of the beings that he had come across. Now, for season 2, 2 years have passed, and at the very beginning, we see Eric come back to life, emerging out of this sacred lake in the middle of the jungle. Now, he's then trying to find where his daughter is, and also finds out that he has something mysterious going on with him, especially when he encounters anybody else with special powers. It is a bit of a bummer that most of the folklore characters from season 1, they don't return for this second season, but we are introduced to some new ones to take their place. Now, some examples are twins who are meant to protect the sacred waters, and they do so in a pretty cool way, but mainly we see how they see the world and how their special abilities allow them to hone in on people who may be deceitful or hiding. There's also this old guy who can see a specific thing, and I'm not going to tell you what that is, but that thing could be hidden in the ground, or pretty much wherever, which then makes him sought after by the corporate villains in the story. Now, these bad guys, they function more like gangsters with payoffs and intimidation rather than just white-collar criminals. And there's also a really cool transformation that we watch as somebody sort of gets carried away and loses their head, but then becomes this whole new fiery character. Now, we don't get to see the full transition as it's happening, but the after effect is still kind of cool. And there are a few other characters who vary in importance depending on what's happening in the story, but they do all have an impact on Eric, and that introduces this story complication that definitely leads to some drama and also conflicting emotions. Now, at first I was a bit concerned that the folklore wasn't being explained, so for anybody like me who's just ignorant of the Brazilian characters, I had to keep pausing to look them up online to just kind of get a sense on what they could do and what their role in the story may be. Now, I do think later on we do get enough context to understand their impact on the overall narrative. But now I'm hoping that we're going to get some sort of documentary that dives into all the lore and examines the variety of characters. For the story aspect, this does move along pretty efficiently. And this season, it only consists of 5 episodes, so it is a pretty quick watch. Now, sometimes it feels as if the story might be going off on a tangent, but the majority of the time, what seemed like a detour would eventually lead back to the main point, so it wasn't a useless adventure. But there are some moments that feel a bit like contrived drama. I mean, just to insert a conflict into the story when one didn't really need to be included, thanks to the ongoing conflicts that were already in play. Like, there's this relationship between a priest and a woman, and while it does help to illustrate some dysfunctional relationships, it didn't impact the story in a way that made it feel pivotal. I like that at the heart of this series, it's all about care and protection. Eric is trying to protect his daughter Luna. I mean, not only from the world and its craziness, but also from danger and harm that is being thrust on her because of his powers, and then an ability that she finds out she has. There's also the story angle of protection that focuses on an old man and a young boy, and how they both care for and protect each other. And it comes across as sweet and genuine, and they have a good dynamic with each other that's made even more powerful because the world looks at them like outcasts. And then there's the very obvious arc that deals with protecting the land and natural resources. And this isn't a preachy, in-your-face type of save the earth message. I mean, even though that is in there, this takes a look at how greed is uprooting and destroying indigenous populations, all for the sake of money. And then in the process, not only tearing apart the land, but also cultures. So it is pretty interesting to watch as characters feel like they're starting out as the antagonists, but once we learn more about them, their true role is one of guardian and protector. Now, for the special effects in this, sometimes they're really well executed. There's one character who, when they look at people, they see kind of like what the Predator sees with the heat map illuminating a person's body. There are also a lot of trippy visuals as characters will shapeshift or go in and out of a trance, and this warbling effect on what we see helps to allow us to feel that transition. Now, overall, I enjoyed watching the second season, especially because it took on a whole new tact by following a reawakened Eric and his interactions with new folklore characters. Now, I do miss some of the ones that we met in the first season, and at first, their absence was noticed. But as the story went along, I became intrigued by all the new people that we're meeting. It was eventually just okay that we weren't going to be following the old guard. Now, the story progression, it is fairly obvious, and sometimes some of the drama becomes rather soapy, but the multifaceted focus of protection and care gives a huge cohesiveness to the narrative, which then was executed in a very satisfying delivery. I would have loved more depth given to the backgrounds of the folklore characters, but I also know that to do so could bog down the story, especially for those that are already familiar with the characters. And what we do get, it is enough to understand and become invested in the players. So, all in all, this is still a fun watch that's able to produce some growing intensity at key moments, making for an entertaining and engaging watch. There's sex, brief nudity, a lot of profanity, and a lot of violence. I give season 2 of Invisible City 3.5 out of 5 couches. So, what culture's folklore tales would you like to see maybe a show cover? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.